When it was the fourth night, her sister said to her, "Pray finish for us this tale, and be thou not sleepy." So she resumed, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the fisherman said to the Ifrit, I will never and in no way believe thee until I see thee inside it with mine own eyes, the evil spirit on the instant shook and became a vapor, which condensed and entered the jar little by little, till all was well inside. When lo! The fisherman in hot haste took the leaden cap with the seal, and stopped therewith the mouth of the jar, and called out to the Ifrit, saying, Ask me by way of boon what death thou wilt die. By Allah, I will throw thee into the sea, and here will I build me a lodge, and whoso cometh hither, I will warn him against fishing, and will say, In these waters abideth an Ifrit, who giveth as a last favor a choice of deaths and fashion of slaughter to the man who saveth him. Now, when the Ifrit heard this from the fisherman, and saw himself in limbo, he was minded to escape, but this was prevented by Solomon's seal. So he knew that the fisherman had deceived and outwitted him, and he waxed lowly and submissive, and began humbly to say, I did but jest with thee. But the other answered, Thou liest, O vilest of the Ifrits, and meanest and filthiest. And he set off with the bottle for the seaside, the Ifrit calling out, Nay, nay! And he calling out, I, I! Thereupon the evil spirit softened his voice and smoothed his speech and abased himself, saying, What wouldest thou do with me, O fisherman? I will throw thee back into the sea, he answered, where thou hast been housed and homed for 1,800 years, and now I will leave thee therein till judgment day. Did I not say to thee, Spare me, and Allah shall spare thee, and slay me not, lest Allah slay thee? Yet thou spurnedst my supplication, and hadst no intention save to deal ungraciously by me, and Allah hath now thrown thee into my hands, and I am more cunning than thou. Quoth the Ifrit, Open for me, and I may bring thee wealth. Quoth the fisherman, Thou liest, thou accursed. My case with thee is that of the wazir of King Yunan, with the Sage Duban. And who was the wazir of King Yunan? And who was the Sage Duban, and what was the story about them? Quoth the Ifrit, whereupon the fisherman began to tell the tale of the wazir and the Sage Duban. Know thou, Ifrit, that in days of yore and in ages long gone before, a king called Yunan reigned over the city of Fars, in the land of the Room. He was a powerful ruler and wealthy, who had armies and guards and allies of all nations of men. But his body was afflicted with a leprosy which leeches and men of science failed to heal. He drank potions and swallowed powders and used unguents, but naught did him good, and none among the host of physicians availed to procure him a cure. At last there came to his city a mighty healer of men, and one well stricken in years, the Sage Duban. This man was a reader of books, Greek, Persian, Roman, Arabian, and Syrian, and he was skilled in astronomy, and in the art of healing, leechcraft, theory as well as practice. He was experienced in all that healeth and that hurteth the body, conversant with the virtues of every plant, grass, and herb, their benefit and their bane, and he understood philosophy, and had compassed the whole range of medical science and other branches of the knowledge tree. Now this physician passed but few days in the city before he heard of the king's malady, and all his bodily sufferings through the leprosy wherewith Allah had smitten him, and how all the doctors and wise men had failed to heal him. Upon this he sat up through the night in deep thought, and when dawn broke and the morn appeared and light was again born, and the sun greeted the good whose beauties the world adorn, he donned his handsomest dress, and going in to King Yunan, kissed the ground before him. Then he prayed for the endurance of his honor and prosperity in fairest language, and made himself known, saying, O king, tidings have reached me of what befell thee, through that which is in thy person, and how the host of physicians have proved themselves unavailing to abate it. Lo, I can cure thee, O king, yet will I not make thee drink of draught, nor anoint thee with ointment. When King Yunan heard his words, he said in huge surprise, "How wilt thou do this? By Allah, if thou make me whole, I will enrich thee even to thy son's son, and I will give thee sumptuous gifts, and whatsoever thou wishest shall be thine, and thou shalt be to me a cup companion and a friend." The king then robed him with a dress of honor, entreated him graciously, and asked him, "Canst thou indeed cure me of this complaint without drug or unguent?" He answered, "Yes, I will heal thee without the pains and penalties of medicine." The king marveled with exceeding marvel, and said, "O physician, when shall this be whereof thou speakest, and in how many days shall it take place?" "Haste thee, O my son." He replied, "I hear and I obey. The cure shall begin tomorrow." So saying, he went forth from the presence and hired himself a house in the city for the better storage of his books and scrolls, his medicines and aromatic roots. Then he set to work choosing the fittest drugs and simples, and fashioned a bat hollow within and furnished with a handle without, for which he made a ball, the two being prepared with consummate art. On the next day, when both were ready for use and wanted nothing more, he went up to the king, and kissing the ground between his hands, bade him ride forth upon the parade ground there to play at Pall Mall. He was accompanied by his suite, emirs and chamberlains, wazirs and lords of the realm, and ere he was seated, the Sage Duban came up to him, and handing him the bat, said, "Take this maul and grip it as I do, so. And now push for the plain, and leaning well over thy horse, drive the ball with all thy might until thy palm be moist and thy body perspire. Then the medicine will penetrate through thy palm and will permeate thy person. When thou hast done with playing and thou feelest the effects of the medicine, return to thy palace and make the ghusl oblation in the hammam bath, and lay thee down to sleep, so shalt thou be made whole. And now peace be with thee." Thereupon King Yunan took the bat from the sage and grasped it firmly. Then, mounting steed, he drove the ball before him and galloped after it till he reached it, when he struck it with all his might, his palm gripping the bat handle the while. He ceased not mauling the ball till his hand waxed moist and his skin, perspiring, imbibed the medicine from the wood. Then the Sage Duban knew that the drugs had penetrated his person, and bade him return to the palace and enter the hammam without stay or delay. So King Yunan forthright returned and ordered them to clear the bath for him. They did so, the carpet spreaders making all haste, and the slaves hurrying to ready a change of raiment. He entered the bath and made the total ablution long and thoroughly, then donned his clothes within the hammam and rode therefrom to his palace, where he lay him down and slept. Such was the case with King Yunan. But as regards the Sage Duban, he returned home and slept as usual, and when morning dawned, he repaired to the palace and craved audience. The king ordered him to be admitted. Then, having kissed the ground between his hands, he recited these couplets with solemn intonation. "Happy is eloquence when thou art named her sire, but mourned she when as other man the title claimed. O Lord of fairest presence, whose illuming rays clear off the fogs of doubt, aye veiling deeds high famed, never cease thy face to shine like dawn and rise of morn, nor ever show time's face with heat of ire inflamed. Thy grace hath favored us with gifts so wisely wrought, as rain clouds raining on the hills by words enframed. Freely thou lavished thy wealth to rise on high, till won from time the heights whereat thy grandeur aimed. When the sage ceased reciting, the king rose quickly to his feet and fell upon his neck, then, seating him by his side, bade them robe him in a sumptuous dress. For it had so happened that when the king left the hammam, he looked upon his body and saw no trace of leprosy. The skin was clean as virgin silver. He rejoiced with exceeding joy, his breast broadened with delight, and he felt thoroughly happy. Presently, when it was full day, he entered his audience hall and sat upon the throne of his kingship, whereupon his chamberlains and grandees flocked to the presence, and with them the Sage Duban. Seeing the leech, the king rose to him in honor and seated him by his side. Then food trays furnished with daintiest viands were brought, and the physician ate with the king, nor did he cease accompanying him all that day. Moreover, at nightfall, he gave the physician 2,000 gold pieces, besides the usual dress of honor and other gifts galore, and sent him home on his own steed. After the sage had fared forth, King Yunan again expressed his amazement at the leech's art, saying, "This man medicined my body from without, nor anointed me with aught of ointments. By Allah, surely this is none other than consummate skill. I am bound to honor such a man with rewards and distinction, and take him to my companionship during the remainder of my days." So King Yunan passed the night in joy and gladness, for that his body had been made whole and had thrown off so harmful a malady. On the next day the king went forth from his seraglio and sat upon his throne, and the lords of estate stood about him, and the emirs and wazirs sat, as was their wont, on his right hand and on his left. Then he asked for the Sage Duban, who came in and kissed the ground before him when the king rose to greet him, and seating him by his side, ate with him and wished him long life. Moreover, he robed him and gave him gifts, and ceased not conversing with him until night approached. Then the king ordered him, by way of salary, 5 dresses of honor and 1,000 dinars. The physician returned to his own house full of gratitude to the king. Now when next morning dawned, the king repaired to his audience hall, and his lords and nobles surrounded him, and his chamberlains and his ministers, as the white encloseth the black of the eye. Now the king had a wazir among his wazirs, unsightly to look upon, an ill-omened spectacle, sordid, ungenerous, full of envy and evil will. When this minister saw the king place the physician near him and give him all these gifts, he was jealous of him, and planned to do him a harm, as in the saying on such subject, envy lurks in every body, and the saying, oppression hideth in every heart, power revealeth it, and weakness concealeth it. Then the minister came before the king, and, kissing the ground between his hands, said, "O king of the age and of all time, thou in whose benefits I have grown to manhood, I have weighty advice to offer thee, and if I withhold it, I were a son of adultery, and no true-born man. Wherefore, an thou order me to disclose it, I will so do forthwith." Quoth the king, and he was troubled at the words of the minister, "And what is this counsel of thine?" Quoth he, "O glorious monarch, the wise of old have said, Whoso regardeth not the end, hath not fortune to friend. Indeed, I have lately seen the king on far other than the right way, for he lavisheth largesse on his enemy, on one whose object is the decline and fall of his kingship. To this man he hath shown favor, honoring him with over-honor and making of him an intimate. Wherefore I fear for the king's life." The king, who was much troubled and changed color, asked, "Whom cost thou suspect, and anent whom doest thou hint?" And the minister answered, "O king, an thou be asleep, wake up. I point to the physician Duban." Rejoined the king, "Fire upon thee! This is a true friend who is favored by me above all men, because he cured me with something which I held in my hand, and he healed my leprosy, which had baffled all physicians. Indeed, he is one whose like may not be found in these days, no, not in the whole world, from furthest east to utmost west. And it is of such a man thou sayest such hard sayings. Now from this day forward I allot him a settled solde and allowances, every month 1,000 gold pieces, and, were I to share with him my realm, 'twere but a little matter. Perforce I must suspect that thou speakest on this wise from mere envy and jealousy, as they relate of the king Sindibad." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Then quoth Dunyazad, "O my sister, how pleasant is thy tale, and how tasteful, how sweet, and how grateful!" She replied, "And where is this compared with what I could tell thee on the coming night, if the king deigns spare my life?" Then said the king in himself, "By Allah, I will not slay her until I hear the rest of her tale, for truly it is wondrous." So they rested that night in mutual embrace until the dawn. Then the king went forth to his hall of rule, and the wazir and the troops came in, and the audience chamber was thronged, and the king gave orders and judged and appointed and deposed and bade and forbade during the rest of that day till the court broke up and King Shahryar returned to his palace. When it was the 5th night, her sister said, "Do you finish for us thy story, if thou be not sleepy?" And she resumed, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king and mighty monarch, that King Yunan said to his minister, 'O Wazir, thou art one whom the evil spirit of envy hath possessed because of this physician, and thou plottest for my putting him to death, after which I should repent me full sorely, even as repented King Sindbad for killing his falcon.'" Quoth the Wazir, "Pardon me, O king of the age, how was that?" So the king began the story of King Sindbad and his falcon. It is said, but Allah is all-knowing, that there was a king of the kings of Fars who was fond of pleasuring and diversion, especially coursing in hunting. He had reared a falcon, which he carried all night on his fist, and whenever he went a-chasing, he took with him this bird, and he bade make for her a golden couplet hung around her neck to give her drink therefrom. One day, as the king was sitting quietly in his palace, behold, the high falconer of the household suddenly addressed him, "O king of the age, this is indeed a day fit for birding." The king gave orders accordingly and set out, taking the hawk on fists, and they fared merrily forwards till they made a wady where they planted a circle of nets for the chase, when lo! a gazelle came within the toils, and the king cried, "Whoso alloweth yon gazelle to spring over his head and loseth her, that man will I surely slay." They narrowed the nets about the gazelle when she drew near the king's station, and planting herself on her hind quarter, crossed her forehand over her breast, as if about to kiss the earth before the king. He bowed his brow low in acknowledgment to the beast, when she bounded high over his head and took the way of the waist. Thereupon the king turned towards his troops, and seeing them winking and pointing at him, he asked, "O Wazir, what are my men saying?" And the minister answered, "They say thou didst proclaim that whoso alloweth the gazelle to spring over his head, that man shall be put to death." Quoth the king, "Now, by the life of my head, I will follow her up till I bring her back." So he set off galloping on the gazelle's trail and gave not over tracking till he reached the foothills of a mountain, chain where the quarry made for a cave. Then the king cast off at it the falcon, which presently caught it up, and swooping down, drove her talons into its eyes, bewildering and blinding it. And the king drew his mace and struck a blow which rolled the game over. He then dismounted, and after cutting the antelope's throat and flaying the body, hung it to the pommel of his saddle. Now the time was that of the siesta, and the wold was parched and dry, nor was any water to be found anywhere, and the king thirsted, and his horse also. So he went about searching till he saw a tree dropping water, as it were melted butter from its boughs. Thereupon the king, who wore gauntlets of skin to guard him against poisons, took the cup from the hawk's neck, and filling it with the water set it before the bird, and lo! the falcon struck it with her pounces and upset the liquid. The king filled it a second time with the dripping drops, thinking his hawk was thirsty, but the bird again struck at the cup with her talons and overturned it. Then the king waxed wroth with the hawk, and filling the cup a third time offered it to his horse, but the hawk upset it with a flirt of wings. Quoth the king, "Allah confound thee, thou unluckiest of flying things! Thou keepest me from drinking, and thou deprivest thyself also and the horse." So he struck the falcon with his sword and cut off her wing, but the bird raised her head and said by signs, "Look at that which hangeth on the tree." The king lifted up his eyes accordingly and caught sight of a brood of vipers, whose poison drops he mistook for water. Thereupon he repented him of having struck off his falcon's wing, and mounting horse fared on with the dead gazelle, till he arrived at the camp, his starting place. He threw the quarry to the cook, saying, "Take and broil it," and sat down on his chair. the falcon being still on his fist, when suddenly the bird gasped and died, whereupon the king cried out in sorrow and remorse for having slain that falcon which had saved his life. Now this is what occurred in the case of King Sindbad, and I am assured that were I to do as thou desirest, I should repent, even as the man who killed his parrot. Quoth the wazir, and how was that? And the king began to tell the tale of the husband and the parrot. A certain man, and a merchant to boot, had married a fair wife, a woman of perfect beauty and grace, symmetry and loveliness, of whom he was mad jealous, and who contrived successfully to keep him from travel. At last, an occasion compelling him to leave her, he went to the bird market and bought him for 100 gold pieces a she parrot, which he set in his house to act as duenna, expecting her to acquaint him on his return with what had passed during the whole time of his absence, for the bird was cunning and never forgot what she had seen and heard. Now his fair wife had fallen in love with a young Turk, who used to visit her, and she feasted him by day and lay with him by night. When the man had made his journey and won his wish, he came home, and at once causing the parrot be brought to him, questioned her concerning the conduct of his consort, whilst he was in foreign parts. Quoth she, thy wife hath a man friend, who passed every night with her during thine absence. Thereupon the husband went to his wife in a violent rage, and bashed her with a bashing severe enough to satisfy anybody. Woman, suspecting that one of the slave girls had been tattling to the master, called them together and questioned them upon their oaths, when all swore that they had kept the secret, but that the parrot had not, adding, and we heard her with our own ears. Upon this a woman bade one of the girls to set a hand mill under the cage and grind therewith, and a second to sprinkle water through the cage roof, and a third to run about, right and left, dashing a mirror of bright steel through the livelong night. Next morning, when the husband returned home after being entertained by one of his friends, he bade bring the parrot before him, and asked what had taken place whilst he was away. Pardon me, O my master, quoth the bird, I could neither hear nor see aught by reason of the exceeding murk, and the thunder and lightning which lasted throughout the night. As it happened to be the summer tide, the master was astounded, and cried, but we are now in mid-Tammuz, and this is not the time for rains and storms. Ah, by Allah, rejoined the bird, I saw with these eyes what my tongue hath told thee. Upon this the man, not knowing the case nor smoking the plot, waxed exceeding wroth, and, holding that his wife had been wrongously accused, put forth his hand, and pulling the parrot from her cage, dashed her upon the ground with such force that he killed her on the spot. Some days afterwards one of his slave girls confessed to him the whole truth. Yet would he not believe it till he saw the young Turk, his wife's lover, coming out of her chamber, when he bared his blade and slew him by a blow on the back of the neck, and he did the same by the adulteress, and thus the twain, laden with mortal sin, went straightways to eternal fire. Then the merchant knew that the parrot had told him the truth and in all she had seen, and he mourned grievously for her loss, when mourning availed him not. The minister, hearing the words of King Yunan, rejoined, O monarch, high in dignity, and what harm have I done him, or what evil have I seen from him that I should compass his death? I would not do this thing, save to serve thee, and soon shalt thou sight that it is right, and if thou accept my advice, thou shalt be saved, otherwise thou shalt be destroyed, even as a certain wazir, who acted treacherously by the young prince. Asked the king, how was that? And the minister thus began the tale of the prince and the ogress. A certain king, who had a son overmuch given to hunting and coursing, ordered one of his wazirs to be in attendance upon him whithersoever he might win. One day the youth set out for the chase accompanied by his father's minister, and as they jogged on together, a big wild beast came in sight. Cried the wazir to the king's son, Up and at yon noble quarry. So the prince followed it until he was lost to every eye, and the chase got away from him in the waste, whereby he was confused, and he knew not which way to turn, when lo, a damsel appeared ahead, and she was in tears. The king's son asked, "Who art thou?" And she answered, "I am daughter to a king among the kings of Hine, and I was traveling with a caravan in the desert when drowsiness overcame me, and I fell from my beast unwittingly, whereby I am cut off from my people and sore bewildered." The prince, hearing these words, pitied her case, and mounting her on his horse, Crupper, traveled until he passed by an old ruin, when the damsel said to him, "O my master, I wish to obey a call of nature." He therefore set her down at the ruin, where she delayed so long that the king's son thought that she was only wasting time. So he followed her without her knowledge, and behold, she was a Gula, a wicked ogress, who was saying to her brood, "O my children, this day I bring you a fine fat youth for dinner." Whereto they answered, "Bring him quick to us, O our mother, that we may browse upon him our bellies full." The prince, hearing their talk, made sure of death, and his side muscles quivered in fear for his life. So he turned away and was about to fly. The Gula came out, and seeing him in sore affright, for he was trembling in every limb, cried, "Wherefore art thou afraid?" And he replied, "I have hit upon an enemy whom I greatly fear." Asked the Gula, "Didst thou not say, I am a king's son?" And he answered, "Even so." Then quoth she, "Why cost not give thine enemy something of money, and so satisfy him?" Quoth he, "He will not be satisfied with my purse, but only with my life, and I mortally fear him, and am a man under oppression." She replied, "If thou be so distressed as thou deemest, ask aid against him from Allah, who will surely protect thee from his ill doing, and from the evil whereof thou art afraid." Then the prince raised his eyes heavenwards and cried, "O thou who answerest the necessitous when he calleth upon thee, and dispellest his distress, O my God, grant me victory over my foe, and turn him from me, for thou over all things art almighty." The Gula, hearing his prayer, turned away from him, and the prince returned to his father and told him the tale of the wazir, whereupon the king summoned a minister to his presence, and then and there slew him. "Thou likewise, O king, if thou continue to trust this leech, shalt be made to die the worst of deaths. He verily thou madest much of, and whom thou entreatedst as an intimate, will work thy destruction. Seest thou not how he healed the disease from outside thy body by something grasped in thy hand? Be not assured that he will not destroy thee by something held in like manner." Replied King Yunan, "Thou hast spoken sooth, O Wazir. It may well be as thou hintest, O my well-advising minister, and belike this sage hath come as a spy, searching to put me to death. For assuredly, if he cure me by a something held in my hand, he can kill me by a something given me to smell." Then asked King Yunan, "O minister, what must be done with him?" And the wazir answered, "Send after him this very instant, and summon him to thy presence, and when he shall come, strike him across the neck, and thus shalt thou rid thyself of him and his wickedness, and deceive him ere he cannot deceive thee." "Thou hast again spoken truth and sooth, O Wazir," said the king, and sent one to call the sage, who came in joyful mood, for he knew not what had appointed for him the compassionate, as a certain poet saith by way of illustration, "O thou who fearest fate, confiding fair, trust all to him who built the world, and wait what fate saith be perforce must be, my lord, and safe art thou from take undecreed of fate." As Duban the physician entered, he addressed the king in these lines, "And fail I of my thanks to thee, nor thank thee day by day, for whom composed I prose and verse, for whom I say and lay. Thou lavished thy generous gifts, ere they were craved by me. Thou lavish thy boons unsought sans pretext or delay. How shall I stint my praise of thee? How shall I cease to laud the grace of thee in secrecy and patentest display? Nay, I will thank thy benefits, for I thy favors lie light on my thought and tongue, though heavy on my back they weigh. And he said further on the same theme, turn thee from grief nor care a jot, commit thy needs to fate and lot. Enjoy the present passing well, and let the past be clean forgot, for what so haply seemeth worse shall work thy will. As Allah, what Allah shall do, waiter he wills, and in his will oppose him not. To the all-wise subtle one trust worldly things, rest thee from all, whereto the worldling clings. Learn wisely well, naught cometh by thy will, but aim, as willeth Allah, King of kings. And lastly, gladsome and joyful, forget thine every grief. Full often grief the wisest hearts outwar. Thought is but folly in the feeble slave. Shun it, and so be saved evermore. Said the king for soul return, knowest thou why I have summoned thee? And the sage replied, Allah most highest alone kenneth hidden things. But the king rejoined, I summoned thee only to take thy life and utterly to destroy thee. Duban the wise wondered at this strange address with exceeding wonder, and asked, O king, and wherefore wouldest thou slay me, and what ill have I done thee? And the king answered, Men tell me thou art a spy sent hither with intent to slay me, and lo, I will kill thee ere I be killed by thee. Then he called to his sworder and said, Strike me off the head of this traitor and deliver us from his evil practices. Quoth the sage, Spare me, and Allah will spare thee. Slay me not, or Allah shall slay thee. And he repeated to him these very words, even as I to thee, O Ifrit. And yet thou wouldst not let me go, being bent upon my death. King Yunan only rejoined, I shall not be safe without slaying thee, for as thou healest me by something held in hand, so am I not secure against thy killing me by something given me to smell or otherwise. Said the physician, This then, O king, is thy requital and reward. Thou returnest only evil for good. The king replied, There is no help for it. Die thou must, and without delay. Now when the physician was certified that the king would slay him without waiting, he wept and regretted the good he had done to other than the good. As one has said on this subject, of wit and wisdom is Maimuna bare, whose sire in wisdom all the wits outstrippeth. Man may not tread on mud or dust or clay save by good sense, else trippeth he and slippeth. Hereupon the sworder stepped forward and bound the sage Duban's eyes and bared his blade, saying to the king, By thy leave, while the physician wept and cried, Spare me, and Allah will spare thee, and slay me not, or Allah shall slay thee, and began repeating, I was kind and escaped not, they were cruel and escaped, and my kindness only led me to Ruination Hall. If I live, I'll ne'er be kind. If I die, then all be damned who follow me, and curses their kindliness befall. Is this, continued Duban, the return I meet from thee? Thou givest me, meseems, but crocodile boon. Quoth the king, What is the tale of the crocodile? And quoth the physician, Impossible for me to tell it in this my state. Allah upon thee spare me, as thou hopest Allah shall spare thee. And he wept with exceeding weeping. Then one of the king's favorites stood up and said, O king, grant me the blood of this physician. We have never seen him sin against thee, or doing aught save healing thee from a disease which baffled every leech and man of science. Said the king, Ye wot not the cause of my putting to death this physician? And this it is, if I spare him, I doom myself to certain death, for one who healed me of such a malady by something held in my hand, surely can slay me by something held to my nose, and I fear lest he kill me for a price, since haply he is some spy whose sole purpose in coming hither was to compass my destruction. So there is no help for it, die he must, and then only shall I be sure of my own life. Again cried Duban, Spare me, and Allah shall spare thee, and slay me not, or Allah shall slay thee. But it was in vain. Now when the physician, O Ifrit, knew for certain that the king would kill him, he said, O king, if there be no help but I must die, grant me some little delay that I may go down to my house and release myself from mine obligations and direct my folk and my neighbors where to bury me and distribute my books of medicine. Amongst these I have one, the rarest of rarities, which I would present to thee as an offering. Keep it as a treasure in thy treasury. And what is in the book? Asked the king, and the sage answered, Things beyond compare, and the least of secrets is that if, directly after thou hast cut off my head, thou open 3 leaves and read 3 lines of the page to thy left hand, my head shall speak and answer every question thou deignest ask of it. The king wondered with exceeding wonder, and shaking with delight at the novelty, said, O physician, cost thou really tell me that when I cut off thy head it will speak to me? He replied, Yes, O king. Quoth the king, This is indeed a strange matter, and forthwith sent him closely guarded to his house, and Duban then and there settled all his obligations. Next day he went up to the king's audience hall, where emirs and wazirs, chamberlains and nabobs, grandees and lords of estate were gathered together, making the presence chamber gay as a garden of flower beds. And lo! The physician came up and stood before the king, bearing a worn old volume and a little etui of metal full of powder, like that used for the eyes. Then he sat down and said, Give me a tray. So they brought him one, and he poured the powder upon it, and leveled it, and lastly spake as follows, O king, take this book, but do not open it till my head falls, then set it upon this tray, and bid press it down upon the powder, when forthright the blood will cease flowing. That is the time to open the book. The king thereupon took the book, and made a sign to the sworder, who arose and struck off the physician's head, and placing it on the middle of the tray, pressed it down upon the powder. The blood stopped flowing, and the sage Duban unclosed his eyes and said, Now open the book, O king. The king opened the book and found the leaves stuck together, so he put his finger to his mouth, and, by moistening it, he easily turned over the first leaf, and in like way the second and the third, each leaf opening with much trouble. And when he had unstuck 6 leaves, he looked over them, and, finding nothing written thereon, said, O physician, there is no writing here. Duban replied, Turn over yet more. And he turned over 3 others in the same way. Now the book was poisoned, and before long the venom penetrated his system, and he fell into strong convulsions, and he cried out, The poison hath done its work. Whereupon the sage Duban's head began to improvise. There be rulers who have ruled with a foul tyrannic sway, but they soon became as though they had never been just. They had won justice, they oppressed, and were oppressed by fortune, who requited them with ban and bane and teen. So they faded like the morning, and the tongue of things repeats, Take this far, that, nor vent upon fortune's ways thy spleen. No sooner had the head ceased speaking than the king rolled over dead. Now I would have thee know, O Ifrit, that if King Yunan had spared the sage Duban, Allah would have spared him, but he refused so to do, and decreed to do him dead, wherefore Allah slew him. And thou too, O Ifrit, if thou hadst spared me, Allah would have spared thee. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Then quoth Dunyazad, O my sister, How pleasant is thy tale, and how tasteful, how sweet, and how grateful. She replied, And where is this compared with what I could tell thee this coming night, if I live and the king spare me? Said the king in himself, By Allah, I will not slay her until I hear the rest of her story, for truly it is wondrous. They rested that night in mutual embrace until dawn. Then the king went forth to his darbar. The wazirs and troops came in, and the audience hall was crowded. So the king gave orders, and judged, and appointed, and deposed, and bade and forbade the rest of that day, when the court broke up, and King Shahryar entered his palace.